Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Social commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And joining us today, our friend, occasional commentary contributor, host of Tablet's Rootless podcast, author of How the Talmud Can Change Your Life, and all-around polymath, Liel Leibovitz. Liel, thanks for coming back on the show.
What a pleasure and an easy fast day to you too, John.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is the Tanit Esther, as we call it. We're not supposed to be eating until the holiday of Purim begins tonight. I don't know about you, Liel, but I am actually going dressed up as Peter Beinart because I am playing Haman in the Purim spiel. And so there's a little culturally specific joke for our listeners. I'm not going to belabor it. Liel, we are now in day 7 or something like that of the Mahmoud Khalil controversy. Got two things to mention. Of course, yesterday in a New York City courtroom, he was granted 2 conversations with his lawyers, which apparently, or they claim he had not had yet because he is in detention in Louisiana, and that the hearing will recommence, or some version of this hearing is going to recommence tomorrow, where the case will be made that he is being illegitimately or fraudulently or kidnapped or whatever by ICE and for simply exercising his right to speech. He has apparently a legal team of 19. I think it's worth mentioning that his lead lawyer was a senior policy advisor in the Biden White House. So that it's important to mention that because it's not just the Senate Judiciary Democrats who said free Mahmoud Khalil. He actually has a lawyer who was a leading official in the last Democratic administration who is claiming that this is the civil rights issue of our time. So I think the Democratic Party can now justly be said to own this issue if they want it. They seem to want it. Not clear to me why they would want it. Do you have any explanation of why they might want it, Liel?
I mean, I could try. First of all, look, what a missed opportunity on their behalf. Had this been a Jewish defendant, the number of lawyers would have been 18. Such a better number, guys. Come on, get with the program.
Another culturally specific joke.
5 lawyers.
18 is the numerical value of the word chai, which is to life, which is the little necklace you sometimes see around the necks of Jews. That's two Hebrew letters. Anyway, so yes, 18, very important number.
My cynical explanation, with apologies in advance for the grimness of it all, is this. I think we've seen plenty of evidence in the last, call it 4, call it 10, call it 40 years, that the Democratic Party is increasingly interested, not in principle, but in power. As such, the main game is basically policing where you are on any given issue and what you're allowed and not allowed to say if you want to enjoy the benefits of, I don't know, having a major motion picture produced or being on some corporate board or teaching at some great big university. I think the messaging from the very beginning, ignoring the incredibly complicated legal machinations of what precisely the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 allows or does not allow the government to do with someone who's not just a visa holder, but a green card holder, which is a certain category of visa. I think ignoring all that and framing it very clearly as, say, Connecticut's Chris Murphy has, as several other very prominent Democrats had, as a free speech issue. We've seen David Hogg basically saying, this is the president shutting down the opinions and voices of young Americans while dropping a few F-bombs. I think the game here is very simple. We frame it as a free speech issue, and if you dare cross the lines, well, then you are not only a free speech opponent and some kind of, fascist troll, but you're doing it on behalf of very powerful interests, John. a powerful group of people who can never be criticized. I won't tell you who it is, John, but you know, and we don't want to be standing with them. It's a very similar trick to what Obama did with the Iran deal. It's like, I'm sorry, we're not going to let a small group of powerful people influence us to abandon our American principle. It's just not who we are as a people. That's the game. That's the play. That's what they've been doing all along, and that's what they're doing now.
I want to quote from an interview Politico did. How did I just lose this? Here we go. Politico Nightly did last night with Michael Roth, the president of Wesleyan.
Mm-hmm.
Not my favorite academic leader, but I mean, he's not the worst. But in some ways, as some of these quotes will,
the bar is
indicate,
low, but yeah.
as some of these quotes will indicate, sometimes when you're not the worst, you're worse than the worst because of the cover you give for the worst. So Michael Roth is an opponent now of the policy of institutional neutrality. Institutional neutrality being the idea that on college campuses should strive in the model of the University of Chicago. Not as institutions, universities should not take positions, that they should have institutional neutrality so that everybody within them can exercise their rights to free speech without seeming to be crosswise of the institution's own views. And he calls this cowardice. It's institutional neutrality making cowardice into a policy. Anyway, it's an interesting thing we could have a larger debate about. But here's what Michael Roth told Calder McHugh of Politico Nightly. What was your first reaction, he's asked, to hearing of Mahmoud Khalil's arrest? I was really shocked that someone in the United States would be arrested for having participated in a lawful demonstration. I assumed there were some other justifications. I thought there would be some crime that had been committed for which the individual was being held accountable, but as I learned more about it, I saw that this was part of this broader attempt to intimidate people from protesting in ways that the White House doesn't like. Okay. Then Calder McHugh says to Michael Roth, Khalil had sent a letter to Colombia's interim president asking for protection after a doxing campaign was launched against him shortly before his arrest. What responsibility do academic institutions have for their students or recently graduated students? Listen to that elision there. Their students are recently graduated students. Mahmoud Khalil has graduated from Columbia, though he is still living apparently in Columbia housing. So he is no longer a student at Columbia.
And there's another elision, which is this lawful protest. He was suspended for actually breaking the rules of Columbia's campus with regard to allowable protests.
And then they revoked his suspension for reasons that we don't entirely understand.
Look, I mean, can we just add that if Columbia had imposed discipline and punishment according to its own regulations and rules, we wouldn't be here today. And I've been getting into wrangles with more left-wing friends of mine about this, who they also want to ally this distinction between citizen and non-citizen. He is not a citizen of the United States. He does not deserve or has not yet received the protections of a citizen. He is in a different status. And the really interesting constitutional question, and we've had cases on either side of this question, is does he benefit from the same First Amendment rights, the same rights as any citizen? So the court has said in some cases yes, in others no. But I think it's important for anyone who wants to talk about this case to understand he is not yet a citizen. And as Secretary of State Marco Rubio said yesterday when asked about it, if he lied on his student visa application, that's enough, which is the pipeline to get the green card. If he lied on that and said he wasn't going to do anything and then lied again on his green card application where you must forswear terrorism, engaging in any form of terrorism, that alone, just as an administrative issue.
Let me tell you, as a green card holder, Christine, that is precisely what I had to swear when I received my own green card.
Yes.
In your podcast earlier this week, Liel, with Ilya Shapiro of the Manhattan Institute, you went through a lot of the statutory challenges to Mahmoud Khalil and the case that he is attempting to make. And you and Ilya, both of you, not native-born Americans been through this immigration process. And as he said, it's not just that you are supposed to swear that you're not part of a terrorist organization. The terminology in these forms is way broader than that. I believe it says, or Ilias says, authoritarian. Are you aligned with or promoted? It's not that you even have to be a member of these organizations.
Correct. Yeah.
Authoritarian. We're not talking about terrorism. We're not talking about communism. The term was left clearly by the law, by the people who wrote this, deliberately broad in order to take in a large range of behaviors and associations that we might deem, or authorities might deem, inimical to the American experiment.
I think that's a really important point, and I think it frames it, and Christine was getting there too, it frames it as precisely what this is. This is not a Jewish issue. It's not a freedom of speech issue. It's not an academic freedom issue. This is an America immigration issue. What kind of nation do you want to have, and who do you believe has the right to be here? Again, the Democrats have made their answer incredibly clear. They opened the borders wide. They invited everyone in. They said they believe that an American citizenship or residency, at the very least, is a basic human right, just like, food, shelter, and Wi-Fi. I think a lot of Americans believe differently, that this is the greatest privilege. This is certainly, as an immigrant here myself, John, this is how I feel. And I think that if you cannot take the very simple step of not cheering for an organization designated as a terrorist group in 1997, currently holding American citizens hostage, you really shouldn't be here. How about that for a legal complication?
Well, and I think... Oh, go ahead, Abe.
I was just saying, he only got here in 2022.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like he was a completely different person, or he came here as a kid. He was a fully fledged adult only a few years ago.
29 years old, I believe, when he came to this country. 29 years old. And there are various mysteries about him that I guess are going to start getting cleared up when the hearing begins. He claims to be a Syrian-born Palestinian. He is traveling on an Algerian passport. Riddle me that. Where does he come to an Algerian passport if he's a Palestinian born in Syria? I don't get that. I was unaware. Did he, like a Jew seeking to reestablish his paternity in the Sephardic countries of Spain and Portugal, did he apply for a 500-year passport that some people are doing now? What is going on there? Is he a Palestinian? Is he a Syrian? I don't know that. I didn't know Algeria was handing out passports like candy.
John, I think he's the Bob Dylan of terrorism. He arrives rather from the Midwest, from the Middle East, into Manhattan, reinventing himself as this kind of American bard of chaos and destruction.
But this is why I think, to Liel's earlier point about now the struggle being quite more about political power, at least in how it's being handled by Democrats, that's why they want to hammer home the free speech issue, because once you start doing a deep dive into this guy's past, I suspect a lot more nefarious things are going to surface. And the free speech thing, though, is also going to fail for them, because I don't think the American people trust the party that was certainly happy to police the speech of its own, people on the left side of the aisle for the last 10 years, and who were actively suppressing the speech of Americans in violation of the First Amendment under the Biden administration on social media platforms. So I feel this is a poor strategy for them, but I guess let them try.
Can I return to the Michael Roth interview? Because it frames the conversation. It allows us a view into the perspective of non-radical liberals horrified or terrified or whatever by what is going on here. Okay? Here's what he says. The first Trump administration, even before it began, there were many demonstrations in many colleges and universities across the country, including at Wesleyan. Wow, really? Including at Wesleyan? I would never have expected Wesleyan, one of the most leftist campuses in America, to have protests against Trump. Ooh. College campuses have been much quieter this time than they were in the first Trump administration. Yeah, because college campus is very quiet, in the last couple of years. Very quiet. Shh. No one's been protesting or having scenes over the last year and a half or anything. Okay, fine. So they're not protesting the Trump administration. They're still in an overhang with Gaza. And of course, there were some Columbia, Barnard, very quiet. They only had scenes last week or the week before last, closing down libraries, preventing people from going to class and all of that. So yeah, very quiet. I think students are trying to understand what's going on in the country and are not sure how best to react to the flood of executive orders coming from the White House. And this is part of the White House strategy. I think a lot of people are reeling, especially at the level of students and faculty. And at the institutional level, a lot of people are frightened. I think this is the greatest fear in civil society, including in the higher education system, since the McCarthy era. People are really afraid to be targeted by the government, whose powers are extraordinary, and when they're willing to arrest or detain someone without charge and threaten to deport him without charges, that's very frightening. 60 schools got letters about anti-Semitism on campus, and that's going to cost all those schools money to investigate and maybe to defend themselves. So I think there's a lot of fear that the current administration thinks of retribution as a legitimate political tactic, and that has not been the case at this level for a very long time. Okay, I mean, there's 10,000 things you can object to in this paragraph, but 60 schools got letters about anti-Semitism on campus. Gee, I wonder why. Any reason anyone can think of why they might have gotten letters asking whether or not there was selective discrimination against a body of students ethnically identifiable as such, whose not only viewpoints might have been discriminated against, but who were being discriminated against on the basis of who they are in violation and contravention of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1965? Is that, am I taking crazy pills? It's like out of nowhere. They're just investigating these colleges. How could this happen? It's like the McCarthy era. Okay, so I think the reason I wanted to go into this is to say that what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I'm witnessing from, again, not radicals, not the people who are like demonstrating, pushing through barriers at City Hall, is they're going after free speech. This is all of a piece with the executive orders. There's no difference between having an executive order that questions environmental policy and going after Mahmoud Khalil and deporting him for lying on his green card. And is he being targeted for his views? Kind of. The question is whether it is legal to target him for his views. It may not be legal to target us for our views, but the rules operating on people who are green card holders or student visa holders are different.
Well, and it's not just views, it's a calls to action. I mean, right. That's a step further than just saying, I think Hamas is awesome. If he said that, I don't think he'd still perhaps not be someone we want in this country. But he was distributing literature that was encouraging the mimicry of what happened in Israel on October 7th here. He was celebrating the anniversary of October 7th. I mean, these are activities of someone who is giving material support to terrorism.
But you don't even if I understood Ilya Shapiro's views as expressed on the Liel Leibovitz Rootless podcast, available to you on the Tablet podcast feed or wherever you get your fine podcasts, you don't need to provide material support. You simply actually have to be congruent or a promoter of or an expostulator of a view of an authoritarian group's view.
Correct. The word is espouse. And not only that, encourage others to support, which he certainly did by handing out pamphlets printed by Hamas.
Right. Now, this is going to be adjudicated in the courts. I think it's fair to say that the administration screwed up in the way it arrested or detained Mahmoud Khalil. They told him it was because he violated his student visa, apparently not knowing that he's a green card holder. I, by the way, am willing to put in reserve until I see it in court that he has a green card, by the way. I assume he does. I don't think his lawyers would say that. Somehow I figure like someone would have released a picture of his green card or something like that. Here's what we're told. We're told he's married. We're told his wife is 8 months pregnant. We're told he was a student visa holder who got a green card. Did a lot of this very fast, by the way, given his
what an industrious man. An
very
example to us all.
Yes. On an Algerian passport, though he claims to be a Syrian. So there's a lot of weird stuff that does not quite seem to add up in time. And his wife will not release her name. So
but
we
it's
don't
also,
know her name.
We should add that all of this his ease of entry, however that worked, given his views and the speed with which he got this green card, all happened under the Biden administration, which, as we know, had no, as Liel mentioned earlier, was letting anyone in. I mean, we probably have quite a few foreign terrorist sympathizers on our soil right now who we are going to very slowly, unfortunately, going to have to find and deport. But he obviously came in under these extremely lax rules. So if he didn't dot every I and cross every T, there are these administrative issues. Did he lie on the thing? Did he go through the proper process? Was he interviewed the way he was supposed to? In any of those points, he can be booted for cause, even separate from his views, particularly the lying on the passport. The wife has been trotted out in front of the media yesterday.
No, she wasn't there.
Oh, sorry, the spokesperson.
No,
right.
The lawyer read a letter from the wife.
Right.
Yeah. The lawyer, this is twice that the lawyer, a female lawyer, read out a statement from the wife who does not want to be named. We don't know her name.
Marry in haste, repent in leisure. That's probably what she's thinking. Sorry.
She needs him to hold her hand while she gives birth because he is the most wonderful person who ever lived, according to her statement. I read this in The Little Drummer Girl by John le Carré, by the way, but I won't go into that. There was the famous case of you remember the story of the woman, British woman who got engaged to the Lebanese terrorist and basically he gave her a bomb to put on a plane from London or the reverse way. Anyway, I'm not saying any of that happened. I don't know what happened. I don't think we can necessarily take the propaganda case for him at face value yet. We literally have been provided no evidence except for lawyers' statements, which are not sworn and are not, we know nothing. All we know is that he has not been, I think the only thing that was really said in court, though we don't have a recording of what was said in court, was his lawyers have not had an opportunity to talk to him. So Judge Jesse Furman said, okay, you can have a call on Wednesday or a call on Thursday, a call on Wednesday, and then Friday we're going to reconvene and you'll have a better, we'll begin the proceedings discussing these matters. It's complicated. There's a very good piece by Jed Rubenfeld in the Free Press laying out the complications in these cases, that there are different contrasting Supreme Court decisions that offer different views of what constitutes a viewpoint or how to deal with these matters. I think it's fairly clear if they can prove that he lied on his visa application and on his green card application, that he has no grounds. That means that he would have perjured himself on his applications. The applications are then instantly deemed invalid, and then he is put on a plane and he goes away forever and never returns to the United States. You cannot.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
In order for that to happen, though, would they have to prove that he was espousing pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah views then?
Well, he was in the green card. In other words, the green card he would only have applied for when he came here.
Right.
And, he was head of QAD at Columbia almost instantly. So I think whether or not he lied on the student visa application is one thing. Clearly, he would have done so, if this is how it's found, on his green card application, if in fact he has a green card.
I want to raise another question, though, which goes back to something Christine says. Look, I am not to be any more of the bearded zealot than I already am. And I think the sort of procedural legal proceedings here are incredibly important, and really look forward to seeing this resolved and believe that the case and the facts speak for themselves. But Christine raised a really important point. She said, look, Columbia and other universities did absolutely nothing to police or monitor anything. So you don't have any quote unquote track record against these people. The Biden administration flooded this country with millions of people who were totally unvetted. And now if we have to play the kind of very, very Talmudic procedural game, like, well, what did he say and when did he say it and what precedent from 1996 this may or may not violate, we'll be here all day. There's a larger point, which is this is an actual national security threat. This person staying here means a person organizing for a terrorist group that is holding American hostage. Like, I think, and I believe the Immigration Nationality Act at least gives the Secretary of State the authority to do it, to basically come and say, guys, I hear all the debate about the procedure and the green card immigration. This is a national security matter. We don't want this person here. That's the end of story, which is more or less what Biden did with, more than 1,000 Chinese nationals, which correctly, following up on the first Trump administration's example, they said, we just don't want these people.
I want to read to you from a bio of Ramzi Qassem, who is the lead lawyer for Mahmoud Khalil. This bio, I'm not going to say anything about it, is on the site of the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowships for New Americans. That's all I'm going to say. Paul and Daisy Soros. He was awarded this fellowship in 2001 to pursue a JD in law at Columbia University. Ramzi Qassem is an immigrant from Syria, and I'm going to assume that he does not have an Algerian passport. Anyway, here is the bio. Ramzi Qassem is a professor of law at the City University of New York. His writing, teaching, and clinical legal practice grapple with the expressions and excesses of the sprawling U.S. security state, both domestically and abroad. From 2022 to 2024, Professor Qassem took leave to serve as a senior policy advisor at the White House. At the Domestic Policy Council, he led interagency policy committees and other complex processes to support and drive the president's agenda on a host of sensitive concerns ranging from the immigration court backlog and immigration legislation and regulations to watch listing, screening, and profiling policy. He also collaborated with the National Security Council Intelligence Programs Directorate and with the NSC Trans-Border Directorate. He has argued before the Supreme Court, at Gitmo. In 2009, and here this is very important, Professor Qassem founded CLEAR, an award-winning clinic and legal nonprofit at CUNY School of Law. For over a decade, he also directed or co-directed the law school's Immigrant and Non-Citizens' Rights Clinic. Okay, what is CLEAR? The award-winning clinic and legal nonprofit. CUNY CLEAR is about creating law enforcement accountability and responsibility, providing know your rights workshops, support for movements and community organizing, and being essentially an activist lawyer, particularly on matters of immigration. So he's got a pretty high-powered, high-level team arguing for him. 25 years in the Soros universe, and you didn't know Soros universe was that old. And he spent 2 years at the White House pursuing exactly the policies that Christine and Liel, you were both talking about, making it as easy as possible for people like him to get into the country and to lower barriers and to have trans organization meetings and committees that would make sure that nobody ever did anything to question any immigrant who came into the United States. So clearly well suited to be Mahmoud Khalil's lawyer. This is what, so the panoply of views goes from this guy, a radical law professor who ends up at the Biden White House to argue for letting in radical Muslims, let's face it, in the easiest fashion as possible, to people going, oh no, this guy is being persecuted or kidnapped or whatever because of the views that he held. I'm hoping that there are long-term political consequences here for the people who are espousing these views. Slow burn. Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, the Democrat mainstream that has a guy like this on the, literally serving on the Domestic Policy Council of their White House. The Senate Judiciary Democrats saying free Mahmoud Khalil. They are handing, I said this yesterday, they are handing Republicans a massive campaign issue. Because now it's not just they're flooding the border and, creating, there's too many immigrants and they're chasing jobs and all of that. It is, they are affirmatively defending and aggressively defending the rights of people who are coming into this country who hate America and are siding with terrorists who hold Americans hostage in tunnels in Gaza, and
John,
advocating for Hezbollah, which murdered 241 Americans at a minimum in Lebanon at the Marine barracks in 1983.
There's something else that this brings up when you read off the lawyer's bio there, that people have to realize there's this massive institutional architecture already in place that is the whole sole purpose of is to bring people into the U.S. who will undermine the country and will work against the country. That's a whole issue that also needs going after, and at least disincentivizing the creation of these networks.
International version of the Progressive Prosecutor Project, basically.
Right.
And I think just the point is so important. Just this bio that John just read, that's poetry in motion right there. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring these people in, then we're going to put them in some academic institution that we control, funded by some NGO that we control, move them into the political party and office that we control, and it's all just one big happy mishpacha designed to hate and undermine American safety and well-being.
And this is the Senator Chris Murphy is an important example here, because for the last 4 years under Biden, the We Hate America contingent among elected officials on the Democratic side has gone a little silent, obviously, because they were in power in the White House. But it's safe again to hate America. It's safe for even more mainstream Democrats to be, very much Trump is ruining our country. We're about to live under fascism. Democracy is dead. And it's got a different tone now than it did the first term, but it's still there. And they're reawakening to an understanding that, of course, has been they've been educated in for the last 10 to 15 years, thanks to things like the 1619 Project. But I see that tone coming into a lot of the remarks of people like Murphy now, where it's okay to sort of talk about their country in a way that they never would have done when Biden was president.
The immigration issue for the last 20 years has largely involved the porous southern border and the question of whether or not people who are coming into the country illegally and are therefore, by definition, illegitimately present, come in, and then there's a debate over whether or not this is quietly necessary for the good working order of our economy. They do jobs Americans don't want to do. They make it possible for the agricultural system to work, various other things, right? Then other people say it doesn't matter. They're here illegally. You can't have people here illegally. You have to have border security. And out of all of that, a certain number of people come in, and then they come in and they commit crimes. They murder people. They run drugs. They do this. And they are coming in within the flood, protected by the flood of millions of people coming in looking for economic opportunities and to lead a better life. Maybe they shouldn't be allowed to do that because we need border security and they don't have the right to come here and they haven't filed legitimately. But they're not here for bad motive, right? The vast majority of people who come in, they're not here for bad reasons. They want to come here because they can't make a living where they are. They need to make a life for themselves and their children. But within that cohort are bad actors. And so the one way you may have to deal with the bad actors is to tighten everywhere, because you can't, there's no filter. There's no, it's not like there's a mesh where you can pour through and then you'll catch the You'll catch the bad guys, and then everybody else can run through. The Mahmoud Khalil example broadens this way out, because this now means that at the elite level, elites in the United States are going to defend the presence in the United States of foreign nationals who are here to claim that America is a terrorist state, that Israel is a monster, that we have a terrible foreign policy, and all of that. And now the argument about criminality, which is really a idea that, you know, there's a girl on a campus at the University of Georgia who is murdered, or it's somebody on the Bay Area Rapid Transit who gets murdered by an illegal, and this is can't be permitted, is now ideological in frame, and it is the Democratic Party is defending America haters and are affirmatively wants the immigration system to let them in and to allow them a prominent role in elite institutions like university campuses.
But isn't it
That's a huge political advantage.
But there's
enemies of the Democratic Party.
There's another layer to this, though, that I think when we're talking about Islamic radicalism, we do have to broaden out and talk about assimilation, which was the huge debate about immigration in the first huge wave of immigrants in the 20th century. Will they become American? What does that look like? Are they allowed to retain some of their cultural practices, but still, you know, embrace our values? Look to Europe to ask about assimilation of Muslim immigrants. They have largely not assimilated. In fact, they are taking over neighborhoods and being quite aggressive and hostile about, even in some cases, enacting Sharia type laws over and above the laws of the countries they have come and settled in. I'm not saying that's what's going on here, but what I am saying is that we are poised right now to have another debate about assimilation in this country. And it's going to capture, as you say, John, all these well-intentioned yet law-breaking people who come to this country for economic opportunity. It'll have to capture them, because the debate about whether or not the countries of the values of our country will be undermined by people who come here and preach the upheaval and overthrow of our form of government, that is a legitimate debate to have. It has nothing to do with racism or Islamophobia or any of these things. As a nation, and as a very multicultural nation, we must occasionally have that debate. And I think it's better to have it now in theory than to have to practice that action and then, you know, litigate it through the courts. But a lot of Americans are concerned about that. It's long been an American fear that we will not be able to retain our quirky system of government if people decide to just come settle in large enough numbers and say, no, we have our own way of doing things.
Christine, I think it's even more complicated than that. I think the debate about assimilation really is a debate, you know, first and foremost for all of us. Namely, it's a debate about what it is that we believe and how fiercely and committedly are we willing to protect it. Do we still hold the same ideas about American, you know, foundational values as the founders have? And if so, are we willing to go out and actually say, I'm really sorry, there may be some ideas like, oh, everyone deserves a shot at the American. It's actually completely incompatible with a very specific set of values that we uphold. I think in a very major and still unspoken way, it's really strange to use the word unspoken about Donald Trump, but the 2024 election was about that. It was really kind of an attempt to understand or reconsider what it is that we actually believe. And I think it is very clear. Here's what we don't believe. We don't believe supporting terrorism.
Okay. I'd like to, I mean, Christine's point is, this is not just a discussion that we're having now. I mean, the real fight over this question, there have been many terms used in the 20th century to explain the question of immigration and its role in the American polity, right? The melting pot, which is a term that was invented by a novel in the early part of the 20th century. Assimilation versus acculturation. So assimilation is you come here, you become an American, you lose your foreign identity, and you become an American. You assimilate. You join. Acculturation is you come, you're fully American, but you can also be what you were when you came here. And some of your culture you might add to the melting pot and make it more flavorful, right? So acculturation was the kind of more liberal version of, you come here, you sink or swim, you learn English, you become an American. You're not Irish, you're not Jewish, you're an American, and that's what you are. And then it's like, no, here you can be an Irish American, you can be an Italian American, you can be a Jewish American, you can be an Icelandic American. That's all fine, because the American part is universalist, and America is a country based on an idea. And then in the 60s and early 70s, as radical communitarianism and we started coming in, that's when you started having Hispanic organizations rise up, starting with the farm workers and all that, and starting to say things like, we need to be able to teach children in Spanish. Our public schools need to be bilingual, because you're giving an unfair advantage to white people who speak English at home, and our kids go to school, so we need bilingual education. And that, I think, was weirdly enough, it was an opening gambit in this much larger effort to say that America doesn't have the right to impose Americanness on the people who come to America to be Americans. And it took 2 generations for Hispanic Americans, broadly defined, to themselves object to the idea that they were not fully American. And I say that because I think the polling over the last 3 elections suggests that they have had enough of being treated as though they want to be fully American, and they want to be thought of as fully American. They are not here demanding and asking for special privileges, and a lot of them have been here for a lot longer than Jews have. For example, New Mexicans have names that end in vowels, and they're called Rodriguez, and they've been here since 1650, And so there is this 40, 50-year ideological trend to say America does not have the right to visit Americanness on the people who live here. And Europeans, because they are blood and soul, it's like, you can't become French. You move to France, you're a Muslim? Sure, but you're not French. I don't know what you are, so you better set up your own world, because we're not ever going to think that you're French. But we never thought that way in the United States, or we have. I mean, there have been moments when the country said enough and put up immigration restrictions. But our doctrine, our founding ideological doctrine, is that America, America is a universal freedom propounding, God gave us all the same rights, and so we can all be the same thing in the same country. And if we're going to start again, that Europe is the great horrible counterexample, and we have now a real divide between these high-end elites who don't have any antibodies against these ideas, these separatist, self-hating, self-abnegating ideas inside the United States, and everybody else who seems to love America and lives in a country that has the largest economy in the world and the highest, given 330 million people, the highest per capita income in the world of a country that doesn't have, isn't small, and all of that. And so now
this is why they point to the extremes in the past of how Americans tried to defend American values, which there were definite excesses. Look, the 1924 Immigration Restriction Act was driven by racist eugenic ideas about who was, good and who was bad based on ethnic and racial background. That's not what's going on now, but it's our own history works against the idea that, yes, we have these universal values, but sometimes we have to defend specific things about America, because that's the only way to protect us from, efforts to undermine our system through terrorism, efforts to undermine our system through teaching America's children that they should hate their country rather than admire it. These are all threads in which there are easy responses that you can make if you're a sort of global citizen of the left who thinks that borders are themselves a crime. And I feel like that's become so much more mainstream in the last 10 years, this idea. That's why you see the "no human is illegal" signs on everybody's yards. I mean, they truly believe that. That is not an American value. That has never been an American value. But it's not racist or Islamophobic to say that, but it's very easy to be tarred in those ways if you defend the idea of having strong borders.
I mean, no human is illegal, but it doesn't mean that you get to live
But
here.
borders are. That's what I always would say. I'm like, yeah, you're
but
right.
it also doesn't mean like I don't think that, you know, that the mullahs are illegal, but they're not coming to live here.
It doesn't even mean anything. It's
I
like
know.
such a it's like a Zen koan gone wrong. It's just not.
So yeah. Meanwhile, Michael Roth, the president of Wesleyan, of course, is going on about the problems of institutional neutrality and how it's cowardly for institutions not to take a stand about things like how bad the Trump administration is. And fine, like, you know what? Institutional neutrality may be a dodge. Maybe all this, maybe this is a fight we need to have. Maybe this, I'm very upset at the fact that I am finding myself in conversations about whether or not what's being done to Mahmoud Khalil is terrible, because I think anybody who thinks that what's being done to him is terrible is a fool. I mean, that is to say, procedurally, maybe the I's and T's were not dotted on this side, but anybody who looks at him and what he says and how he has behaved and thinks that is acceptable behavior for a 31-year-old, you know, person coming to this country from another country is a moral or idiot. It is not. It is not acceptable. Now you can say our laws make it so that he can do that. This is where Jonah Goldberg referred to the, you know, whether he's a Skokie Nazi, like this free speech case in the late 70s when the Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois, and
they were all American citizens. Those guys.
They were American citizens.
Yeah. Can you imagine if, you know, a Hungarian white nationalist leader came here and agitated for the destruction of the U.S., what all the same people would be saying?
I mean, forget that. Some of us here are old enough to remember that when Seb Gorka was appointed the first time around in the first Trump White House, this is an American citizen, right? They came out and said, because there are allegations that his father, all of them, by the way, completely baseless, was somehow connected with a group that at some other point in time may have had connections to the Nazi party, he should be stripped of his citizenship and deported. These are the same people who right now are defending Mahmoud Khalil's right to be here in America. It's a farce. This whole discussion is a farce.
Well, there's plenty of Democrats who have been playing that little dance about Elon Musk, saying the same thing. You know, oh, is he really American? How long has he been here? He's only been here 13 or more years.
Of the Biden administration's kind of aggressive stripping of quote unquote very violent settlers of any rights that they may have to return here, visit here, etc., etc. But you know,
yeah, no. So everybody, everybody's got the exception to the rule. Like everybody has a crime. Everybody's got their favorite crime where you actually suspend all the rules because they're bad, right? So every couple of years there's a new one, like sexual harassment on campus. So no due process for anybody on a college campus from 2009 until 2016. If somebody said 6 years ago when I was drunk, that guy may have raped me, or I just remembered that he raped me, or something like that. And it's like, okay, you're right. And he doesn't get to face you as an accuser. He has no rights in our star chamber. We're just going to listen to you, and we believe all the accusations and all of that. Again, same people, probably very close to being the same people who were they silent about. Columbia is a good example. Columbia, of course, had the famous case of Mattress Girl, who walked around claiming that she had been, I don't remember what she had been raped by somebody who proved that he hadn't raped her. And then she spent 2 years walking around with a mattress strapped to her back because she was, protesting the fact that she hadn't gotten her way. And of course, the entire left liberal campus was on her side, as opposed to as opposed to the due process rights
And
of the
Colombia
person
ended up
she has
paying
falsely
an
accused.
undisclosed seven-figure compensation to this young gentleman in question.
Right, exactly. So I don't know. There is everybody's got a crime. My crime is being an anti-Semite. I'm happy to have all of your rights abused. You hate my people. I don't care. I would like you to fall down an open manhole and die. And I dance on your grave, and that's fine. And that's why laws exist to protect you from my passions like that. I live in a country. I'm happy to live in a country where my passions are therefore controlled by the rule of law. But this is a rule of law question now. Rule of law says you sign a form, you say you were this, you weren't, or you violated the terms of the form that you signed.
Shalom
Beat
Mahmoud.
it. Shalom Mahmoud. Exactly. So very quickly, Steve Witkoff is going, our negotiator in chief, having apparently been negotiating with Iran, is now today going to negotiate with Russia. And tomorrow, I guess, he'll negotiate with China. And then, he'll go to Roswell and negotiate with the aliens in Roswell. Apparently, but you need to know nothing about anything except that you are a negotiator to negotiate as a negotiator. It's really a thrilling example of expertise, cultural sensitivities, and understanding of Russian history or of Iranian history or anything like that. Whatever. This is what Trump wants, so this is what he gets. Ukraine came, agreed to ceasefire terms. And what was the response yesterday from Lavrov and Putin to the Ukrainian concessions, right? Putin puts on fatigues, goes to Kherson, and says, kill all of them. And we will treat every captured Ukrainian soldier as a terrorist. And now Witkoff is going to negotiate for a wonderful ceasefire with these guys. So I don't know. Like every now and then there is a moment. This is like going to Iran with a cake in the shape of a key. Matt Connetti has a piece in our current issue, which should be up today, about the constant American delusion about being able to negotiate with Putin. Putin's making it pretty clear he's not going to accept this ceasefire deal. Does that then mean, do you think, that we agreed to the weapons flow and to sharing intelligence with Ukraine because Ukraine assented to our terms, and if Putin doesn't assent to it, doesn't come in on the other side, that Trump isn't going to find some way to cut Ukraine off again?
Yeah, I don't know where he goes from here. I mean, if Putin is just a flat no, I don't know what Trump does. I mean, I really had been imagining that Putin would give Trump an opportunity to pretend that this is going to work. That doesn't seem to be happening, at least not yet.
Look, the past is certainly not an indication of the present, less so of the future. But let us recall that during Trump 1, he started off, say, with the Iranians saying, we should negotiate. We should really see what these guys have to say, et cetera, which was disappointing to a bunch of us. And as soon as he realized that is simply not going to work, Qasem Soleimani was, lying in pieces all over a battlefield. Let us hope that we're seeing a very similar pattern here vis-a-vis Putin.
We should talk about Iran, because Trump said very interesting stuff about Iran yesterday. He said time is very short, and basically said if Iran doesn't want to come to the table with me, could blow up the nuclear sites, is effectively what he said. He said time is very short. They cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. They better listen to me and come to the table, or some version like that. And yeah, if the mullahs, then I believe Khamenei called him retarded yesterday, something like that. Use the Farsi word for retarded. Said he was a fool, whatever, and said, this is all a trick, and this is a guy who violates signed deals that are signed, and all of that. So maybe we're going to get lucky here, and Trump has put out his hand in some form of hey, let's make a deal. And Khamenei is slapping his hand. And then Trump goes, okay, fine. You know what? Kaboom. I'm now going to turn to our guest, Liel Leibovitz, and thank you so much for being with us. For a commentary recommends.
What a pleasure, as always. These days, for some light, fun reading, I'm returning to one of my absolute favorites, The Ambassadors by Henry James, a really surprisingly timely reminder of the hilarity that ensues when straight-thinking, morally sound Americans go to the old continent and discover that the Europeans are doing and thinking about things very differently than we do.
It is the theme. It is his theme, even though he didn't much like living here himself,
or the Jews for that matter. But that's okay.
Or well, so much to say there. Anyway, but yes, The Ambassadors by Henry James. Remember, there is a break point in the Henry James literature around the 1890s when you can no longer make sense out of a word that he said. But the books written before the 1890s are all, magnificent. So, Liel, thank you so much. Everybody should obviously read Liel when he writes, and listen to Liel's Rootless podcast, and read How the Talmud Couldn't Change Your Life, and read him when he is in the pages of commentary. Author of one of the most popular articles we published in the last 10 years, The Return of Paganism. So if you haven't read that, just Google The Return of Paganism, and you will find Liel an important part of this conversation, actually, as a sort of side measure. So happy Purim today to all who celebrate. May you get so drunk that you do not know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. And until tomorrow, for Abe and Christine, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.